Hi guys, welcome back to the Warrior Academy podcast and also the live interviews that we are running on the Warrior Family groups, both in Dubai and in the UK. There's also being live streamed to Facebook, our channels there, and on YouTube as well. I'm here today with Dr. Nancy Haines. Dr. Nancy is a confidence coach, a corporate trainer, and an author. Nancy helps committed professionals turn up the volume on their dreams and lead with confidence. She's here today to talk to us about how we can live a life with confidence and how we can overcome bullying. Nancy, amazing to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So how are you?
Good. Every day is different. So today is a good day.
Today's a good day. That's good. And you're in Dubai right now as well. So, you know, things are slowly getting better here. They've slowly started to ease on the rules. So I think we're all enjoying a tiny bit of freedom, which we've definitely been missing out on.
Oh my gosh. Yes. That extra hour to be able to go outside to just kind of walk. It just feels like freedom again, except if you do it during the day, like where it's super hot, then that's another story.
Yeah. The only problem is since the lockdown started, when the lockdown started, it was about 30 degrees and now it's about 45. So no one wants to go outside.
I know. That's like I tried running the other day for like 30 minutes and I just couldn't do it. It like the heat from the mask and like the heat from the outside, I was like, whew, it's a bit intense. I'm going to go back home.
I think the nice thing is the thought that you're allowed to go out, right? So you kind of feel a sense of freedom.
Take advantage of it.
Totally. So Nancy, what I think would be really cool is if you just told us a little bit about who you are and what you do right now, and then afterwards we can go into your background a little bit. That's all right?
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So I am a confidence coach and a corporate trainer and developer. I'm also an author. The ebook Keys to Confidence, which I'm sure I'll explain at some point how I got into even creating that. But that's currently, I'm here in Dubai. I have my husband and myself here and 15 plus years of HR experience. 8 of those I had my own business in the States, in LA. And then I came out here.
Amazing. Awesome stuff. So you mentioned, 15 years in HR. And before all of this, I often think, the reason we do what we do in the first place is based on our values, and our values tend to be formed over time because of the things that happen to us or we happen to. And, I'd love to find out what it is that makes someone want to become a confidence coach. What is your background?
So my background is in human resources, but crazy enough, it started with accounting. I said, I'm really good in accounting. I want to do accounting. And then as I kind of grew into who I started becoming, then it turned into, I really like being of service and with people. And I think because the voice started coming out, like if you would have met me in high school, you would have never imagined the person that I am today. So if you can imagine, like if I go back into those years, it's like a whole nother person, because when I think about it, I was like a super shy. I was such a nerd because that's all I could hang on to. Like I knew I wasn't the prettiest. I knew I wasn't fit. I knew I wasn't like the cool girl. So I kind of felt comfortable with being the nerd. Like I'm really good in like academics. So I kind of stuck with that, and that's kind of who I became, and I let that be my label. Like I'm really smart, or I'm really like a high achiever. I was in like the AP classes, the honor classes, like all of that, because that's all I really felt comfortable in.
Right.
So you fast forward.
Yeah. So I mean, how old are you at this stage?
So this is all up and through, I'm gonna say about 18, 19, through my first year of university.
You spent 19 years almost stereotyping yourself into a particular role, putting yourself in a bit of a box. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. And a part of that you said was a bit of a defense mechanism, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I was an introvert, I didn't really know how to connect with people. I always immediately went into, the moment I would see somebody, it was like, oh my gosh, they have a better, body, a better haircut, a better life. financial status. I mean, we come from a very, very humble background. Like I had to work out in the fields, and that's how I made money because I knew my parents didn't have any. So, that becomes your title, like that becomes the internal person. And so when you see others, with the nice new clothes or like with, they brand new cars, immediately you put yourself like, I'm at the bottom. So that just became this thing that I was that person. So I didn't really know who I was, actually. I just kind of was like, well, this is all I know. So this is where I'm going to stay.
So 19 years of that. And then at what point did you kind of change or reach a turning point?
My first year of university. I think having to meet new people, I'm completely out of my comfort zone. So no parents, no family, nothing around, complete strangers, and I was forced to talk to people in my classes. That was where I'm like, oh, either I'm going to be by myself throughout this whole year or I have to talk to people. And luckily, it was people who started talking to me because I think they probably felt sorry for me. They were just like, this poor girl is just sitting there like she doesn't talk to anybody. But little by little, people came to me. So I kind of like, it was easy for me to talk to one person at a time. Like if somebody came to me, it was like, oh, hi. I was comfortable with that. But when it came to like 5 or 6 or 7, I could feel myself like contract. And then I became quiet again. And so I kind of started picking up on all of these little things that I hadn't even noticed before.
Yeah. Interesting. So it wasn't necessarily a one-off event. It was just a gradual process because your surroundings, your community, your environment had changed, right?
Completely.
Interesting. So during that transition, did you experience any bullying or anything like that when you moved into the university?
Do you know what? I experienced it all through high school.
Okay.
So all through years 1 through 12, I can see it, and like I'm like, oh my gosh, like when you remember, you take yourself back into those experiences, and then you're like, my gosh, I wish I had the confidence now back then. But I was very, very skinny. I mean, not that I'm not now, but I was like super, super stick thin, and so kids would like say it like she's anorexic, she's as skinny as a toothpick, and when you hear that as a child, you start like owning that. And
But this is one of the things we say, whenever you're speaking to a child, you're painting the image of what they're going to grow into, right? And that's the same for their environment and their peer groups.
100%. Even parents, like, I mean, my parents, their nickname for me was flaca in Spanish, which means skinny girl. So, that just kind of, it was just that was me. That was a picture that I painted. And so when it even came to dating, like, I was like, no, because I'm not that girl and I'm not that girl. Like, so little things like that. Like I remember so clearly one day, like this boy from school just randomly said, you look like a 12-year-old boy. And I was like 16 at that time. And it was just like when you're just like, this is the most embarrassing comment ever in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like it's where I shut down. Like that was the moment I shut myself down, and I was like, nope, I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm going to sit in the front of the class. So every class I had, I made it a point to sit in the front because I didn't want anybody looking at me. And if I had questions, I could raise my hand and I would have my eye contact directly with the instructor. Wow. And so I wouldn't see anybody else around me. So I made it a point to always be early, always, even in the university, to sit in the front of the class my first year, because that habit of always going to the front so that nobody sees me was like this continuous program that became implanted in my head, and it became a belief.
So going through, several years of bullying as you did in high school, was there a moment of breaking that you went through where you just reached the tipping point and that was it, you had enough? And can you think back to an exact moment where that kind of tipping point happened? Yes,
it actually happened towards the end of my first year of the university, where I started kind of getting my voice a little bit, but it wasn't enough. Like I wanted to feel the breakthrough. I didn't even know what I was doing at that point. And I challenged myself. I said, you know what? I'm going to apply for a studies abroad program.
Mm.
And I didn't get to go out of the country, but I got to go to a different state. So I got accepted in like Mexico State University, totally like different. I would have never said, oh my gosh, this is where I want to go. But it was just, I felt it. I needed to do it. And I took myself out of where, you know, I started kind of getting comfortable again. And I completely faced my fear head on, which is going somewhere where nobody knew me, a completely new state. And I felt it because the first 3 months I went through hardcore depression because I couldn't get myself to talk to anybody. So I would just go to school, walk by myself, come back home, and just kind of be at home. But I couldn't figure, like, I was just like, I want to talk to people, but I just can't. Like, I couldn't. The fear was just too much, and it was overwhelming. So overwhelming.
And this was how many years? How many years into the bullying was this?
This is now, I was 20.
20.
I was 20. Mm-hmm.
20. So from what age did that start then? That was like a 10-year.
Oh yeah.
Journey, right?
But since I can remember, since I was a little girl from like 4, 5, 6, I still remember myself just being very quiet. Like I was a doer. I was a follower.
Yes.
The older cousins did something, or everybody else was always better and cooler. And, you know, I was always just like the yes girl. I would do anything that anybody, just for the acceptance. Like I wanted to feel validated. So even from like that age, I can remember like doing stuff with them that I didn't necessarily want to play. I didn't want to play those games, but just to feel like accepted, I just did it.
Completely. It's really interesting, you know, from studying bullying for a while now. It's what I've realized is that it's a very predictable journey. And when you're speaking to a parent whose child's going through bullying, that's actually really reassuring, because you're kind of surrounded by this, you know, you think it's just chaos and it's happening to your child and you can't take them out of it. But when you actually sit someone down and you say, look, this is actually a very predictable journey, then it becomes very obvious, right? So there's 3 things that I can see from your story that you went through. The first is, you know, you had a loss of freedom. So the first stage, and we call them, there's 3 moments of misery and 3 moments of magic that a child would experience as they go through bullying, right? And we try and have students experience those 3 moments of magic to get them through it and develop their character. But what was interesting is you had this moment. The first moment for you was this loss of freedom. You couldn't go and do the things you wanted to do. You didn't feel like you could have a voice. You didn't feel like you could socialize. You didn't even feel like you could be yourself and really kind of express yourself in the same way. So there's that loss of freedom just happens, right? Then there was this, the next point is you either live your life like a victim or a bully, right? So what we find is, you either become a victim or you become a bully because of what's going on around you. And it sounded like it happened so long for you that you lived this lifestyle of a victim for a long period of time. 10 years is almost chronic bullying. Well, it is. It's chronic bullying.
A long time.
And it sounded like it continued into university, at least in that first step. And this is what I often say to parents: unless your child overcomes bullying and you guide them through that process of standing up to it and they overcome it, it follows them into the next community, because it's like you haven't learned those lessons in life you need, like the actual tools, the actual practical tools you need to kind of help you. And the third thing is a moment of breaking, right? And that moment of breaking for you came at the very end, where you said, that's enough. I'm now going to change, and you changed. So it's really interesting to me to hear a story like that, which has gone on for so long, and to be able to plot those 3 moments.
It's insane, because I can still even through the career, because I didn't know the tool that I was using, that I was forcing myself to say, no, this is enough. Like, I need to change this. I didn't really realize what was going on. And even in my in work, when oh my gosh, it was horrendous. The moment, I remember I was an associate director for a nonprofit, and the CFO was horrific to me, but I never stopped it. Like, I would just go home, literally, I would clock out, leave, and I would just go home and cry. And it was just like, again, like that feeling again of just again, like, really? I thought I was done with this. And it continues and it continues, because you haven't really dealt with the root.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, this is it, isn't it? And it strikes me, some of the conversations we've had, you experience bullying as a child, but it doesn't stop there. If you don't understand it and overcome it properly and dig into why it's happening, and to understand that process, it continues into adulthood. It's not just into childhood, it's into adulthood. It affects the work you choose, the friendships you make, the relationships you make. It affects absolutely everything you do. And it sounds like you've experienced quite a bit of bullying from an adult perspective as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I feel like I didn't understand it, and that obviously, like when you're still going, you're just like, why does it always happen to me? And I would go into the next position, and it would happen. Like, crazy enough, I will say that the bullying as an adult happened from other women. Interestingly enough, only women, and I always found that so like, why? When I'm in, like, if a woman is above me, as far as like her being the executive director or a CFO or somebody above me, it was like this thing of like, I'm going to push you down and you're going to stay down.
Threat.
And once I got the coaching, I'm like, oh my gosh, now I understand what was going on in their mind. There was a sense of threat, whether it was, looks, skills, whatever, that they felt threatened by it, and that was their reaction. And when I got to the level of understanding, it's almost like that anger that I had towards those people just kind of went away. Where I was like, oh, I get you. I totally understand why you did what you did.
That's really, really interesting you should say that. So I'd love to kind of dive into, when it comes to bullying, what your realizations are now that you've been through it so much. Why does bullying happen? And I'm often asked this, when I do workshops and there's 50, 60 parents in there who are going through some really difficult bullying, they're very upset and they want to know, why is my child being bullied? Why are they being bullied? Why does bullying happen, Nancy?
For me, I will say the child, and I say it from my own perspective, looking back, you lose your identity. You don't know what your identity is. When you see people around you, your community, so at home, so culturally, for example, coming from a Mexican household, you're told, shh, be quiet, stand over there, like, shh, don't talk, adults are talking. So you're constantly put down, 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 down. Then you go into high school and you're the minority, and so you kind of start building this thing up, but it doesn't even that. So that's part of it. I feel like that's part of it. But I feel the root cause of everything is your loss of identity. You don't necessarily know what your strengths are. You don't even know what your value, your core, like, who are you? What's so great about you? Because all you see is what's great about everybody else. And you like spiral downhill because you will forever be in a victim mindset when all you can see is how amazing somebody else is, how their grades are better, how they're better athletes, how they're, they have better parents, they have a better social status, whatever that is. It's that identity of, I don't even know who I am. I don't have anything to hang on to that I say, I'm happy, I'm proud of myself for this. And I feel like a lot of parents don't even know how to provide that to their children, to say, hey, let's sit down and have a chat. What do you love about yourself? Once they hear a child say nothing, you need to start working on that. Or when they say, well, they have to feed the child with that positive reinforcement. I'll tell you what I think is great about you. I think you're so loving, or you're so caring. You care so much about, what, like, it's you having to plant that seed into the child's mind to say, what else is good about me? You start slowly shifting from everybody else is better than me into what's so great about me.
We had a great interview with Lucy Barkas about leadership the other day. And one of the things she said, which makes a really good leader, which ties in so well with what you just said, is someone who believes in you a little bit more than you believe in yourself.
Yes.
And you just, isn't that a perfect way of explaining it? You just kind of grow into that role. Even if it's just like 10% 100%. More, you grow into that 10%, right?
100%. 100%. As long as you have almost like somebody cheering for you. until you get to that point, and then you can cheer for yourself, because you can't start cheering for yourself right away when you're just trying to kind of understand what's happening. That's basically what you're trying to do. When there's a parent that kind of says, you know what, I'll tell you what's so great about you, or they do, they create a habit of complimenting that child every day, or making, I do a mirror exercise where I have, a child look in the mirror and look at themselves straight in the eyes and say, this is what's great about you. Teaching them affirmations. So it's little by little, you start feeding that into them. And then little by little, they'll perfectly grow into it. But then you go into the next phase where they can start cheering for themselves, but you've created now a strong foundation.
Yeah, completely. Really, really interesting. I think, it'd be quite cool to get into a few different steps, that people can use, sort of practical tips and maybe a process. But before we do, I mean, in terms of patterns you've noticed within bullying, are there any in particular?
I think one of the big ones is when you feel like, for example, if somebody says something about you, and then you start feeling down, in that moment is when maybe parents need to talk to their children and say, if anything happens, the first time it happens, you come tell me. Like, just giving them that, just in case it happens, you come and tell me. That way the parent is aware right away, and then you can start working towards it. But really, you should be working on that even before that, really implementing that mindset for your child, because it's true. And I get it. A lot of parents, they're frustrated sometimes, they're helping kids with their homework and they're like, you're so stupid. It's little comments that come out that you do not realize that you've just planted that seed into your child's head that says, I'm stupid.
Yeah.
And so you play into that, and that becomes a belief, but you don't really know how to control that as a child. You don't really know that that's in the background. It's just, that's all you've heard. That's all you know. So that's a big one, is first and foremost, having parents do that now. Yeah. Don't wait until the bullying happens. Do that now, because when you reinforce that into a child of how great they are, their affirmations in the morning or whatever it is, they stand up for themselves. Like, if you notice, there's videos on YouTube of little kids, when they're like, they talk back, or and I'm like, that's awesome. And when you look at what the parent was doing, like, they tell them at home, like, you are smart, like, you are, whatever it is, little kids, like, these are like 3-4-year-olds, where they're making them do the affirmations in the mirror. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yes. Because us as adults are doing it now, when we're like in our 30s and 40s, like, dang it. But implementing that, it's just like the solid root that when something comes their way, it doesn't really shake them up as much as it should.
And I think that advice is brilliant, to start now. And I think one of the things that we talk about in the Not a Victim workshop a lot is how, it's so typical for parents who come to the workshop to be acting reactively instead of proactively, right? So the best way I try and explain this is I normally on the slide, I stick up there a life jacket, and then a sort of a ring that you throw in the water, for survival. And I say, are you here? What do these two things represent? And they're, I'm not quite sure for ages. And then I explain that it's acting reactively or acting proactively. And, while we're able to help you react, if you're acting reactively and dealing with your child going through bullying in the moment, most children are, it's like 80% or something of children are likely to go through bullying. So, rather than being in that moment and trying to deal with it when emotions are running high, when everyone's upset, and it takes time to build confidence, and now you're really on a steep slope trying to crawl your way up. It's possible, to mentor children through bullying while they're in it completely. But if you're able to act proactively and you're able to put steps in place, it's just going to make the transition, which most children will go through, so much faster, So
different. But, I find sometimes, and I say this to you because I've had clients that have brought their children and they're teens. And then when I've had the session when the parent comes in with the child, you'll hear like the mom or the dad say, well, they need to be getting straight A's. Well, they want to sleep instead of doing the work. And that's not very, this is how they're supposed to be. And immediately it's like, okay, you gather all that in. I have to separate. And I say, I have to tell the child, go outside for just a minute. I'm going to have a chat with your parents. And I literally have to tell the parent, do you realize the damage that you are doing to your child with what you are saying? No, it's not me. It's in school. It's their friends are telling. And I'm like, oh, it starts at home. You have just put that in their head. They're not producing enough. Instead of understanding, like, okay, what is it that's preventing you from studying for 3 hours straight? What is it that you don't like, or what is it that you don't understand about math? Why is it hard for you? Like, it's getting to that point of understanding. So you meet them with that place of understanding versus immediately reacting to it. Because I can see why parents are like, they react. Why is that child doing that? When as soon as I get to school, I'm going to talk to their parents and I'm like, you realize you're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You're just bullying now from the other side. Like,
and I mean, this is it, isn't it? When we look at that and we look at inspiring through language, when you're telling someone that they need to do this and they need to do that, rather than explaining what they might want to do, it's kind of flawed from the very beginning, isn't it? It's because it's not the best way to try and, to get someone to do something or to get the best out of someone. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's funny because a lot of parents are like, well, I don't know how to do that. And again, their parents didn't do that for them.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of it is conscious conversations, learning to have a conscious conversation with your child. A lot of parents are like, this is so awkward. Like, I'm not going to talk to my child like that. And it's like, well, yeah, you kind of have to, because times have changed. Yeah. Either you're going to go with the flow or you're going to hit this wall every single time. When your child leaves to the university, they're going to have issues. Are you a part of the solution or are you a part of the problem?
This is really interesting because, we spoke about this before one of the workshops I did, and, we were just about to press go on the Not a Victim book. It was just about to go out there. And I suddenly had this realization. I remember talking to you. I was like, if we're going to help, children get through bullying, what I realized is we need to do so much work with parents and their lives in order for them to fully understand what's going on. Because at the end of the day, what I found was happening was, children were being mentored through bullying based on what their parents had experienced, right? It was like previous trauma that the parents were experiencing was fully influencing their child's transition. Do you know what I mean? So we suddenly realized that we needed to do so much work with parents, with sort of to a level of introspective enlightenment. And it was such a key moment, and I know you've got a bit of a story about that as well, haven't you? How
it's leading with fear. That's you're teaching your children to have that fear of doing certain stuff. And so instead of helping them, you're pushing them because you're scared. You as a parent are scared.
Totally. And you're acting reactively, because ultimately it's not just about preparing your child for the bullying, it's about preparing yourself for the bullying, right? Yes. I mean, what's harder is what's just as hard as going through it yourself. And I think, it's never just the child that goes through bullying, it's the whole family, right? The whole family goes through it. But yeah, I remember you mentioning something to me in the past of, your mum would say something to you. She'd always be, saying something to you in the same way about a certain trait or whatever. And then you were like, why does she keep doing that? And then you asked her and she was like, well, I used to be bullied for this.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That was like probably one of the most horrible things ever. I posted a picture. Well, because I will always say, something in me always said, you need to face your fear. Like, always. I was like, okay, I'm scared of, for example, the body shaming, hearing the little boy telling me that I was, a toothpick, and I was not athletic. So when I got to the point where, I met somebody that said, oh, I'll coach you through this. Like, let's go to the gym. Let's do this. She was the one that kind of grew me into, I was like, okay, if she believes in me, I'll do it. And I ended up doing the body competition, but I was so dedicated and committed, and I was so proud of myself because for the first time I could see myself and be like, wow, like, oh my gosh, there's a change in my body. Like, yes. And I didn't tell anybody what I was doing, like not a single soul, until I posted the picture of me, in the swimsuit. I swear it was like if I had killed somebody, because my mom took me off of Facebook, number one. She unfriended me. And then She shut down her entire Facebook. And then all of a sudden I get a call from my sister saying, what did you do? I was like, I have no idea. My mom just like took me off of Facebook. And she's like, people in her work, like teachers that are friends with you on Facebook, like were telling her like, wow, what an amazing accomplishment. Like Nancy looks so great in her swimsuit. And it was like my mom's fear of like the body you're creating, you know, oh my gosh, it was like everything under the sun. She's super, super, super conservative, like Catholic. So it was like you creating temptation for the world and you're an evil child. And it was just like the worst thing I could have done. She was so angry and like, I couldn't understand. I was just like, what? Like my siblings have done worse and she has not acted like that. Like it was just this like, almost like she was about to hit, but she was just like, you could see it in her eyes. It was deeper than what it was. But because I had already kind of had coaching, I was kind of like, this is deeper. This is something deeper. It doesn't add up. Like the reaction was way above and beyond. And I couldn't talk to her about it. And for years, we didn't talk about it. And it wasn't until like 3-4 years ago that I actually asked her about it. But I said, do you remember that one time when this happened? Yes. And I asked her, like, why have you always been so like you must be conservative? Like I had to wear turtlenecks forever. And I was like, man, it's so hot. Why do I have to wear turtlenecks? Like, I don't want to wear this. But it was so like, no, you must. And then finally, when she said, well, when I was younger, I was bullied. She said, I didn't know that it was bullying, but because now she's a teacher, she obviously goes to all these classes and they learn about all this. So she's more aware and she's more conscious. So when she said it to me, that's when everything just like, oh my gosh, her fear of what happened to her, she's projecting it all on me. But instead of having a conscious conversation about it, she still hasn't even dealt with it.
Yeah.
The fact that she reacted like that, she hasn't dealt with it. So I knew it was not a topic we could touch at that point. Because I said, she's not ready to talk about it, or she would have like gone into detail of everything. And I left it at that. I was like, now I understand. Now I understand why she reacted like that.
Really, really interesting. There's different layers, I think, of this, and you know, if I'm doing a workshop, I'll go into what I call white belt content. I've made mistakes in the past where I've gone into black belt content on bullying, right? and you go deep into it, and you're like throwing out DeMartini quotes about people not loving themselves enough and all this sort of stuff, and it's just not the time and the place, right? And so there's got to be a system for it. But ultimately, one of the things that DeMartini says is that, you know, if you are being bullied about something, it's because there's an aspect of yourself you don't love enough, right? And if you are being bullied by someone else, it's because there's something within them that you're respecting, that you want to have, that you feel you are missing, and that's really hard for parents, I feel, who are going through a lot of pain, a lot of emotional stress. They're watching their children upset every single day. And, you know, for a child, this could be the most traumatic experience of their life, right?
100%.
You know how old they are and what they've seen and done. So you know, from that perspective, what can a parent do to improve their perspective on bullying and try and dissolve all that hatred and anger so that we really can stop it, you know, essentially stop the cycle from continuing? Because in the same way that your mum went through it and it started ruling her life, right? It would have impacted different decisions she makes all the way up until, you know, like I said, the work we choose, the friendships we make, the relationships we make, and the way we raise our children. It's all stemming down from, like, you know, experiences we had 40 years ago.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So,
yes.
So ultimately, there's one thing, you know, there's lots of things we agree on with this, and one of those big things is that there's, you know, it's that perspective that we need to give people of why it occurs, because ultimately, if you can forgive the bully and understand to kind of love yourself through that, it fades away, and suddenly you take power away from them, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think in that forgiveness piece, you take away something much bigger than that. And that's the awareness of where that comes from. Why did that happen to me? And in that, you learn to grow, because then it highlights the areas where you need to improve. And ultimately that, we're growing through life. We go through phases in life. We go from single to being married to then having children. You become parents to then, or you become an entrepreneur. There's so many changes and transitions in life that we realize that different challenges and different insecurities and different doubts and all of that comes up during those different transitions. And they're new, and some of them you've never dealt with before, but all of it goes back to the awareness piece. I think for parents, the biggest thing is when they catch themselves reacting to something, it's that thing that they need to say, stop. Why did I react like that? That's it. Why did I react like that? For a lot of them, if it's something traumatic that happened many, many years ago and they shoved that in the closet for years and years, they may not get it right away, but it's that thing now you've just planted in your head. Why did I react like that? Was that really necessary?
Yeah.
And then you start kind of
third person, right? Just looking down on the situation, having that ability to just kind of separate yourself and what kind of caused that reaction? Where does that stem from?
Do you know what? This reminds me so much. I have a client and he was going to do a presentation. And I think I mentioned to you about this before, but it was one of the craziest things where he said, I've been in senior management for years, like 20 plus years. All of a sudden, this like anxiety is taking over me when I'm presenting. Like, I feel like something's come over me and I can't shake it off. That's what he kept saying. That's what he kept saying. When I shared with him my own story of like what happened to me, out of nowhere, he says, funny that you say that. He said, when I was in like third grade, I was in a band and like I was performing, and my I think it was the tuba or whatever instrument he had. He said I didn't practice enough and I couldn't do it, and everybody was laughing at me because I messed up. I was the only student who messed up, and he said I ran off the stage crying. And as soon as he said it, I could just see it in him. It's been a part of him throughout this. He hasn't dealt with it. He's pushed it away. It's come up, but he's pushed it away. But it's now at the point where he can't push it away. It's in the surface. And when he stopped talking, I could see like it was something painful that he went back into. And he just stopped and he said, can you give me a minute? And I said, please, like, you give him the minute. But he was like, where did that come from? He's like, out of nowhere, this realization to like, oh my gosh. And then as we worked through it, he was just like, I cannot believe that has been like in my system for 35 plus years. Yeah.
Wow. It's pretty important inner work, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
It is huge. That's why I always say, look, you're going to face it anyway. It may not be now. Yeah. It may be 10 years from now. It may be tomorrow, but you're going to face it. Like you're going to have to confront it at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And that for me is why it's so important to mentor people through it, because they just sort of fall through bullying. They feel like it's just something that happens to them. And if they get out the other side, they're lucky and that's great. They got over it. Cool. But you've got to have time to process it. And this is exactly it, right? That final step, which is just so important, of putting bullying into context. It stops children from becoming bullies, because something crazy like 70% of people who go through bullying become bullies themselves because they don't know how to channel that negativity. They want to get power back into their life, so they become bullies, right? Or they get on the other route and they just live a life of a victim. So for me, that perspective is all about what I call forgiving selfishly. It's when you're dealing with a parent and a child who are going through bullying and it's highly emotional and everyone's very upset. They don't want to. The idea of forgiving the bully is just crazy. It almost fits in, although it's so fundamental. It fits in with what I would call black belt content on the bullying piece, right? So
they're not ready for it. They're not ready for it.
It's not. Some people are not ready to hear that, but by the end of the course, they're completely ready for it. And the way I frame that, the way I term that is forgive selfishly, because ultimately, if you hold on to that anger and frustration and pain, and you're only hurting yourself. You're not hurting, it's not like you're holding on to a grudge doesn't hurt the other person. They don't even know about it. They don't even care. But it's like holding a hot coal. Do you know what I mean? You're not letting it go. It just does more damage to you than it does to the other person. So, when you say forgive selfishly, it should be empowering. You know what I mean?
And funny that you say that, because it really is empowering. And I say it even with parents. I feel like a lot of it is also because of ego. Like, as a parent, you're like, my child is not going to be getting bullied. Watch me take care of this. And it's like, it's not about that. Like, you're going right, like you're going right into that space. But again, it's also, are people ready for it? I can sit here. I mean, I can digest my mom's life in like a minute. I'm like, boom, boom, boom. She needs to work on this, this, like, but I do not dare say anything, because the moment that I have, it's gotten into like I wanted to force her to see it. I wanted to like I was holding the mirror up in front of her. Any chance I got, I was like, look at this, it's you. And she wasn't ready for it. And she just grew resentful, like with me. She like was like, get away from, like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk to her right now.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my gosh. And that's something that's really difficult to understand when you're just like, oh my gosh, but if you just let it go, like, you could free yourself from so much.
Yeah, completely.
But when they're not ready, you cannot force somebody to see it. You cannot force somebody to see it. And it's not until like even this last summer that my mom said, I have a question, and then she kind of like threw in a few little things here and there. And in my head, I was like, that seed that I planted like 3 years ago is right now that it's like bursting, where she's just curious, but she's not making it. She's not fully open to it, but she's curious about it. And it's just kind of like, okay. She's like opening up a little bit. There's a little crack, and then being able to put that. And a big part of it is ego. She's not, she's a parent. Like, why, how do I know more than she does? Like, no way.
Yeah. It is. I mean, and that forgiving is, even in the most terrible of traumas, people are able to do it, and it does empower people. There's incredible stories from Nelson Mandela, who forgave his captives, and they went on to live incredible life without that holding him back. I mean, my own granddad was in the Danish resistance. It's the national day in Denmark, so it's their Independence Day. And they're all celebrating, freedom from the occupation of the Nazis. And he was in the resistance, and ended up in prison there, in the concentration camps. And he managed to survive it with his brother. And he went on to become a doctor. And one went towards science, one went towards religion. But he was adamant that he was forgiving them for what had happened. Right. So he never held on to it as a grudge, despite all of that happening to him. He managed to have that kind of power within him to forgive what had happened. And I think what a difference that can make to your whole life. If you go through something that traumatic and don't hold on to it as a grudge, you're actually able to forgive someone for that. And for me, looking at someone who's gone through something like that, that should be super inspiring for someone going through bullying. Do you know what I mean?
100%. I mean, you see it on the news all the time where, people's, they forgive the murderer of their, son or daughter or their children. And, when it's just like, how could they do that? And it's at the end of the day, when you see the big picture of it, when you see the bigger picture of it, not in the pain, not in here, but when you take a step outside of that and you see the chains that come off when you are able to forgive, and you allow that space to grow, because you can't get past it. It's going to continue pulling. Like, it's the chain that's like, it's going to be like that little reminder or that little thing that happens throughout your life. And then it's going to happen to your kids. And then it's still going to be that thing that until you learn how to forgive and realize that it's so empowering, and seeing it in that perspective, it changes the world.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Very, very interesting. You're a confidence coach, and this is what you do. You teach people you help people become more confident. You mentor them with their confidence, with public speaking, presentation skills. You've done it with me, and it's been amazing. Like a before and after.
I have.
I used to talk really, 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 really fast, and now I talk a little bit slower, and I still do a few mistakes, but it's a work in progress.
But yet, hey, as long as it steps forward, you're good.
There we go. but one of the things that I know that you're well known for is your 4 steps, right?
Yes.
Would you mind taking us through your 4 steps, just really, really briefly? Because I know we could probably talk for hours about it, but just as
no. Quickly. So 4 steps. First one is recognizing what it is that you're working with. Second one is release. Once you recognize it and you're aware of it, you need to learn to release it. The third step is reprogramming. So now that you've released it, what program do you want to implement in your mind? And so you reprogram your entire belief system. And then the last one is reinforcement. Now that I feel good, how do I continue to do that as a habit? And then it becomes a full foundation of who you are.
Amazing. I love that. We could do a different live on each R, I feel.
You probably could. We could go deep. We could go deep into each one, but we're touching the surface here.
There you go. I love that. We've got a great question here from Seb Van Lockham. Seb's an ambassador in the UK, so he's a warrior supporter in the UK there. He says here that parents using their experiences is so true. I feel my experience is completely irrelevant now in a social media and digital world. How do you think this has or should change our responses?
You know what? It's not that it's irrelevant. I think it's the core of what the situation is. Like it's just a different channel. It's just a different outlet that it's happened. So like kids now, getting bullied on social media, it still goes back to the core of their identity. Are you, maybe you were never like given that love and that, like my parents were never like super loving and said, I love you, like none of that. And it wasn't until later that, the family suffered a traumatic experience that then, okay, now we got to do it. But when you think about it, it doesn't matter if your experience is relevant or irrelevant because the core of it is still there. Yeah. That's the most important piece. Whether for them, it's coming through social media, you can easily connect with your child by when they, if let's say something happened, somebody unfollowed them and all of a sudden they're having a breakdown. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, like there's worse thing, when you as a parent, it's easy to get into that, like, oh, come on, like that's nothing. You should see what I used to deal with. It's not a competition. It's actually a perfect opportunity for you to connect with your child, to learn about what they're feeling and what they're going through, and then be able to share your experience to say, interestingly that you say that you're dealing with that through social media. When I was in school, this and this is what happened to me, but I felt the exact same way that you did. Yeah. That is an opportunity for you to connect with your child.
Totally. One of the first things that happens with bullying is a breakdown of communication. And one of the best ways to improve communication is to make yourself more relatable. So if your child is going through this, and you feel a disconnect, which is the breakdown of communication, it causes that disconnect. That disconnect means that more bullying occurs. If you can find a way to relate what they are going through to what you have been through, you'll really, build that connection with them, I think.
100%. 100%. When I look back at situations, even now with the parents, they're in such different eras. Like, the parents that I have, some of them had their kids while they were older. So they even dealt stuff way different than what their current child, and they keep comparing it. When I did, I had to swallow that and just do as my mom said. I didn't talk back. I didn't do, and it's like, why are you're comparing apples to oranges? Your experience is totally different. Why don't you use this experience to like connect you both and talk about it? Yeah. So different.
Well, this is it. I don't know how far up the black belt system we're going to go on the bullying, but one of the ways to look at it, which can be one of the most healing ways of looking at it, is whenever there's something terrible happens in life, there's a complete opposite going on. Something beneficial is actually happening. So when your child goes through bullying, it's quite tough to bring up with parents, but when your child is going through bullying, there are benefits to that. One of those benefits is that you may be rallying as a family, and suddenly your family are getting more connected because of it, because your child's seeing this huge level of support, and you're now diving into their life and getting a deeper sense of who they are and, helping them with their life. First of all, family rallies, that really helps develop the connection. Second of all, there's this moment where they can actually experience post-traumatic growth. So they can experience that exponential growth in their character because of what they're going through. So, it's like, looking at it that way, which is quite tough when you're acting reactively, not proactively. It's one of those things that can certainly help, though, I think.
Truly powerful. Even now, I mean, I can even say the difference of the choices and the decisions I make from an empowered state. Not that failure doesn't come, not that fears don't come up. Obviously that still comes up, but the way that you manage it once you are confident in who you are, whole nother ball game, because you're exactly right. It impacts the relationships you get into. Like, I could easily walk away from a relationship when I was dating, when I owned my worth, and I was like, time out. I don't care that you're, a millionaire and you're doing this and you're doing that. I don't care. I deserve a certain way, and that's what I want. Sorry. And it was that sense of, you've taken your power back to where you don't allow anything less than what you're worth. And you really own it and you live it.
And back with online bullying and cyberbullying, which is obviously massive, I'd probably say the majority of bullying is now moving to that, and that's because it's timeless, it's spaceless. Physical bullying happens in a certain place at a certain time. Self-bullying is very similar to cyberbullying in the way that it can happen at any time, all the time, right? But cyberbullying, really, it's children still go through the same thing. Those 3 moments of misery where they feel a lack of freedom. They feel like prisoners in their own home. But ultimately, what I'd say, Seb, is that exactly what Nancy said. It's no different to the bullying you may have experienced or other people may have experienced 20 years ago, 50 years ago. It's the same principles. It's just a different delivery.
100%. When you talk about the cyberbullying, my sister has teens. So they're like 10, 11, 12, and then like a 15-year-old. And when I hear them talk, it just amazes me when they're saying, oh, so-and-so has like 1,000 more followers. Oh my God, she's so much better than me. And hearing them immediately, I tell my sister, do you hear that? That's where you jump in. That's where you jump in. That is a red flag. Instead of, but you're too busy. And I get it. I'm like, you're busy cooking, you're busy cleaning, you're busy doing whatever else. But you have to be alert to when your children are talking. And as soon as we hear that, it was like, I jumped in. I was like, okay, here we go. And that was the first thing I did was, what did you just say? And then hearing it again, I'm like, I just wanted to be clear. And then it's a level of understanding. Why do you say that? Oh, because she has 1,000 more followers. And I was like, okay. So if a person has more followers, you feel like they're better. And she was like, yeah. And I just started getting into it with her. And I'm like, and I was bringing it back to her, asking her questions enough about that. What do you love about yourself? Nothing, because I'm she's, and you start hearing and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much deeper. And it was like, okay, let me take you for a walk and let's have a conversation. And it was reframing her mindset because it's so implanted. If they have more followers, if they have more likes, it was like this huge pressure and it was this huge deal for her. And I was like, what? Okay. Yeah. And it was immediately like, okay, let's go for a walk. And it was the moment of connecting with her, of understanding her pain, understanding that, and then helping her reframe it a little bit with questions. And it kind of gave her, again, it might not solve it in that moment, but you're planting the seed for them to think differently.
Yeah.
It's all you're doing.
And it's interesting, isn't it? I love that, planting the seeds. It's such a very real sort of saying, isn't it? But I mean, ultimately, if you can spot those red flags and you can start doing something about that, and then I think you're saving yourself time in the long run, right? When you water the right seeds, because if those things grow out of hand, you're gonna take a lot of time to fix problems which occur down the line, right? So Nancy, I think we should finish in a sec, but one last thing I'd like to say is, if we've got any students watching this who are maybe suffering with low confidence, maybe they are going through or they have been through bullying, and they've maybe got a bit of a victim mentality, what would your practical advice be for them to develop their confidence?
The very first one is take some time for yourself and write down a list of a minimum 10 things that you love about yourself. Take away everybody outside of you who's doing what, just you on your own, you getting the chance to connect with the essence of who you are. That's the very first thing, is write down 10 things that you love about yourself and make it a habit on a daily basis, as uncomfortable as it may feel, to look at yourself in the mirror and give yourself at least one compliment. One compliment a day is all it takes to create that little habit, and you start planting your own seeds in your head. And when they're ready, and after you've watered them for a while, it'll be the moment that you start feeling a shift in yourself. But you have to do it for yourself first and foremost, to make that list for yourself. And if you cannot come up with 10 things that you love about yourself, then start asking the people that love you, whether it's a parent, whether it's a best friend, whether it's a cousin, whatever it may take, to help you come up with that list of 10. But you use those 10 as an arsenal, so that whenever you start feeling low, you go right back into looking at that list. But do not stop complimenting yourself every single day. One thing. That's all you got to do. One thing.
I love that. That's absolutely brilliant. It's almost like a different take on affirmations, isn't it? You're asking a question and then you're giving an answer. I think that's brilliant. It reminds me of one of the questions we get is, what's the most powerful or effective form of self-defense? And my answer is always mindfulness and meditation. Like you said,
it really is.
Building that arsenal, you're building up, your defense mechanism to look after you when things get tough. And ultimately, how many times do we hear a negative voice in our minds?
And that's exactly, you just said it right there. I was just about to say, what this does ultimately is you start raising the volume of the good things that you feel about yourself. And it starts lowering the volume of everything else, of the noise around you, of what people say or don't say. And you get to the point where your values and you when you look at yourself, you're so connected to you. The volume is so high on that anything that happens, it's almost like, okay, well, that's your opinion. I don't think that about myself, because you own it. Like your roots are like fully growing and grounded. Yeah. And it begins with those simple steps. Yes.
Owning your traits, Brilliant. A good example of owning your traits. We had there was one student I heard of who was bullied quite a lot from this. But if you imagine, if you were a basketball player and you're really, really tall, and you actually love that about yourself because you makes you an amazing basketball player, and you get complimented all the time, and you love the fact that you're tall because you're a great basketball player. If you love that about yourself and you went to school and you were picked on for being tall, it wouldn't have the same impact on you, because you love that trait, because you own that trait. And it's the same for any trait you've got, right? And that what you've just said about self-love and diving deep into that and finding out exactly what it is you love about yourself, and if you're struggling with that, asking other people for their input is just so valuable. It's such good advice.
100%. Even people as clients as adults can't figure it out. Okay, like, can you imagine how disconnected you've been? You're used to being disconnected of like you, the essence of you. And it takes them to say, I don't know. When I see them just like, what? I don't know. Well, then you got to ask those people around you, because they love you for a reason and they're around you for a reason. You might want to ask them then. Yeah.
Nancy, that was absolutely amazing. I feel like we covered loads of amazing insights, diving deep into how to develop confidence, but on a very deep level, long-term confidence, how to improve your self-image, and also into why bullying occurs and the steps to take to get through bullying. Absolutely, completely valuable. I know that you have an amazing book as well. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way, or how can they find out about your book as well?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon, but if they want to, I'll send it to them for free. And they can just email me, nancy@thecenterofconfidence.com. Actually, can I type it in the chat? Or you type it in the chat?
If you send it to me, I can just post it on the comments. That's no problem.
I'll send it to you. And then they can email me and I'll send it to them as a PDF. That way they don't have to pay for it. That'll be my gift to them.
Cool. That's so kind of you. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for coming on today. Really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Had so much fun. And, it's fulfilling to be able to share these tips and tools, honestly, from like the bottom of my heart. so that I can see another person, another child, another parent have that tool and be able to move forward.
Amazing. Nancy, thank you so much.
Thank you.